Hi guys, today I'm working on another tarot card. This one is the Empress, and I want to talk a bit about the value of stepping away from a piece. This is something that I do very frequently. It really does tend to come and help me with quite a lot of my pieces with a lot of different problems, which is nice. Nice to have this very tried and true method for working through things, but a little bit about the card if you're interested. The Empress, she represents abundance and femininity and beauty, and right off the bat when I was planning this one out, roses came to mind. I really love combining negatives and positives, a duality of elements into one piece. So I immediately thought of that, how the rose is a symbol of beauty, but it has its thorns, which I knew that I wanted to have a key feature in this card to blend it together to create the Empress. And I had that cornerstone design element figured out pretty quickly, and then I just didn't really think more beyond that, how I could work through the design of this character. And I think that was really the part that I could have enhanced the process of this a little bit better. In the end, I was able to add the things that I wished that I had thought of at the beginning, which was very lucky, I guess, in a lot of ways that it was digital, that this piece is digital, because that allows me to rework things that traditionally would have been a lot more difficult to fix or change. And the print of the Empress is actually the exclusive print for Patreon for this month. Eventually, she will be part of the full tarot deck, but this is the only way to get her as a print. So if you'd like to get a print of the Empress, make sure to sign up for the print tier over on Patreon by the last day of this month. And if you do, you'll get the print and the sticker pack. And yeah, there's a link down in the description that'll take you over there. I do seem to have a habit of not fully giving myself the time to think through an idea or a concept before I start working on the piece, and I hate that. I don't actually want to work that way. It tends to be that I have this pressure that I give myself to get things done quickly, so I don't allow as much time to be set aside for those beginning stages. The conceptualization and the sketching, those are things that feel like I could rush past them. I don't like that. And this is just another example, another piece that looking back on it, as I worked on it, I was feeling unsatisfied with it, and I was thinking more and more, how can I make this a little bit better to fit and suit the type of artwork that I actually want to do, that I feel excited about. But anyways, that's just a very rainbowy way of saying I'd like to put more time into thinking through concepts before I dive in, because there are so many ways that I can enhance a piece, that I can put something that would just really tell the story more, really make it more interesting for me to work on. And I love finding those things. I just think it's one of the things that makes making art for me so satisfying, when I find those little puzzle pieces and they all come together and it makes a piece as strong as possible, and I just feel really connected to it. Yeah. But as I was working on this piece, it felt more and more generic to me. I was feeling like it didn't really have kind of the spark that I was looking for. And I wasn't really exactly sure why that was. So there were a few things that I did before I stepped away from the piece to get some better, clearer thought processes about it. But first I looked back at the other cards that I had in my tarot deck so far that I've already designed, and I looked for areas that this one was starting to diverge. And there were a few things that I could tweak that were very minor, but there's a little bit of the way that I was coloring it that I could pull it back in so that it married better with the other cards. And that helped, but it didn't really help with the feeling of it being very generic. So ultimately, I had to step away from it and stop looking at it. That is almost always the key for me. I tend to really just keep looking at a piece because it really bothers me when something doesn't feel quite right. I have a hard time stepping away from them because I just want it to be fixed. And once it's resolved, then I can feel better. But when I do make myself step away from it, it helps me to actually think through it a little bit better. It clears my mind, and then I am usually able to come up with a solution. Whereas when I'm sitting there staring at the piece, I can't. I'm just seeing what it is and what I've already drawn, and it's a lot harder to think about what it could be. But I highly recommend doing this with pretty much any of your pieces. I love doing it with lots of my pieces, being able to just step away and look at it. Even just like a very quick break can go a long way, especially when you're working on something that you're not quite sure how to execute. I find that when I'm working on a new technique, being able to step away and look at, say, my reference fresh and then the piece fresh, it helps me to see it a little bit better and to see some of the flaws that I can start tweaking or areas that aren't quite working. But it also helps me to see the things that are working that I'm really enjoying, or things that I can see I've gotten better at. So I do this very frequently with lots of my pieces, and I get a lot of benefits out of that from just seeing a piece new. But ultimately, the design element that I decided to add, actually, it probably feels really potentially out of place for the card itself, but it just felt so right for the deck that I want to create, or the overall story and world that I wanted to build up with each card. So ultimately, I decided to give her bones showing through. This is a design element that I use very often because I love it. I love creating pieces that have this element. So it feels very true to me. And again, it feels like the world that I wanted to create, the story that I wanted to tell with these cards. And I did really want to make these my own. And this is an element that I had intended to have stronger in all of the cards, more of like a creepy, otherworldly kind of an element. And putting it into this card and being so much happier with the end result makes me realize that I should, one, revisit the cards that I've already created to help push it farther into that direction, because I'm so much happier with it. And it also tells me that moving forward, I need to make sure that that is something that I'm really thinking through. Am I including that kind of element, that spookiness into each of my cards fully? And I think that I'm sure that thinking about that from the very beginning is really going to help me to get the outcome that I want from the beginning. But yeah, with this card, I had basically finished her. I was messing around with little details with exactly how I was coloring the line work and exactly how the contrast was like between the roses in the background, and it was basically done, and I was unhappy with it. So that's when I stepped away from my, really I could have called it done, my done piece. In fact, I actually had saved like the final version, the final print version of her, and I walked away. And I think it was a couple of days later that I looked at it again. I knew I wasn't happy with it still. And that's when it hit me that that was an element that I had always intended to have throughout my decks, or the cards in the deck. And then I added it and I loved it. I completely 180'd how I felt about the card. Instead of feeling very blah about her and feeling like it was really generic, I really connected with it and it felt right. So that was very exciting. I love that feeling of solving a problem that I have and then seeing the piece as what I had always hoped it would become. And don't forget, the Empress is the print of the month over on Patreon. So if you'd like the exclusive print of her, make sure to sign up by the last day of the month and you'll get her and a sticker pack. And that's it for today. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.